to another Wilderness Photographic skills video. In this video we're going to look at HDR photography, not a full overview, but just a very quick example that came up on a recent workshop, not necessarily in the kind of sort of traditional wilderness realm that we're actually inside a church, but these techniques can be used in any environment where you want a really high dynamic range, i.e. part of your image is really bright, part of it's really dark, and you're struggling to get it all exposed. It went through a little bit of a sort of fad a few years back of a lot of photographs were coming out in a kind of HDR style, as you might call it, of everything within the image being quite exposed. And like any photographic process, if it's overdone, if it's overcooked, it can look a bit odd, or certainly not to everyone's tastes. But done subtly, all it's doing is getting a greater range. And we've all got smartphones these days that do this automatically, and that's one of the frustrations that people that are getting photography have, that their phone can take a better photograph than they can half the time. And it's because it's using this artificial intelligence and technologies to do things like extending that high dynamic range by processing the image. It's just that we don't necessarily know it's doing that because it just does it automatically. But there are certainly situations, and I think this church example is a really good one, where using that technology can be to the benefit of the photograph. So this a particular student, Peter, as a keen amateur historian of looking at internal and external, actually, church spaces and all the sort of history and different layers within it, which is really fascinating. When we walked into the church, it was very dark. So this image here is probably the most kind of realistic to how it looked to the naked eye. So we set up on a tripod. We wanted a view down the nave to the crucifix and the stained glass window at the back there, and we kept as much as possible consistent. So we're on a tripod, ISO down at 100 to try and reduce the amount of noise as much as possible. On a zoom lens, Nikkor lens, but going to 18mm, so quite wide, and an f-stop of 9 to give that kind of maximum range of depth of field of sharpness throughout the image. And this actually had to have the shutter open for 6 seconds just to get this amount of light, so it was really quite dark. There were artificial lights, but partly we didn't want to sort of switch them on and burn up power that wasn't necessarily ours to burn. But also the natural light and the natural sort of ambience of it was really, really nice. It's just that it was too dark for even the naked eye to pick up on. So what we have in an image like this, where we've got the stained glass at the back being very, very bright, and then this beautiful carving in the roof and in the rood screen being very, very dark, is you end up with the stained glass being overexposed and all the dark areas being underexposed. You can't see all of the detail. So this is where HDR comes in. So what we actually did was take 3 frames. So we have this one at 6 seconds. Everything else stays consistent. We just changed the shutter speed. So this is 6 seconds, and this is bringing out the mids really. All the kind of block work. You're getting nice detail. The darks are still too dark, and the brights are still too bright. So the next image along, this exposure was a 30-second exposure. So all those dark places are now getting detail because it's open for half a minute. But all the bright bits, like the stained glass, are massively overexposed. They're completely burnt out. And then finally, a much shorter exposure of 0.6 seconds to predominantly get the stained glass. These windows over here we're not too worried about because they're not our central focus, and they're not coloured either, so they're just white windows really. But the stained glass window is really beautiful, and we wanted to retain all the different colours and the detail in that. But as you can see, everything else pretty much, you get an impression of where the pillars are and just about where the pulpit is, but most of it is completely underexposed and you can't see it. What we can do, and there's lots of different bits of software that you can do this in, but I'm just going to do this in Lightroom because it's something that most people use. Firstly, if there's any adjustments that we want to make, we can do them in here. So to my eye, it's ever so slightly off angle, so I might do something reasonably straightforward of enabling profile corrections for the lens, because we're shooting 18mm, so it'll be slightly off. You can see that change. I'll just switch that off and switch it on again. You can see that kind of barreling changing. I think it is ever so slightly wonky, so let's just try auto and see what that does. Yeah, so that's actually straightened everything, which might be a little bit too much. So I actually quite like the angles on it. It was just that straightening that was worrying me slightly. And it's actually, yeah, so the window is straight, but the altar is not. So I'm going to go, I think I probably will go with the window. Tweak it a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I think you could play with that all day and not necessarily be happy with it. The other thing that I might just do while we're here is just give it a little bit of sharpening as well. I'm just going to up that a little bit. Good. Rather than having to try and copy that across, I can highlight all of them and just sync settings, and I've got pretty much everything highlighted, and then it will do the same across the set, so they should all match. With them still highlighted, what I can do now is right click or control click and go to photo merge. This is all within Lightroom, and just go to HDR. Because I'm on a tripod, I don't have to worry about what's called ghosting or deghosting. That's if you were handheld and there was a slight little bit of movement in your frame, or maybe you might have something moving within your frame. Obviously, when you put those frames together, you end up with a bit of a hint of something moving around. This is on a tripod and there's nothing moving in it, hopefully, so we don't have to worry about that at all. I can create a stack, so it will put all the merged images all together. So I'm going to keep that checked. If you want the original source images to the side, just uncheck that one. And I'm pretty happy with the way that this has put it together. Well done, computer. So I'm just going to click merge. It will have a little think about it. And it's quite sophisticated, the process it's going through of locating all the well exposed parts of each image and putting them all together. Really quite clever. And there we go, that's our finished image. So it does have a little bit of that HDR look at the moment, of slightly unrealistic to the human eye, but in terms of recording the actual space itself, it's absolutely brilliant, because we're getting all the detail in everything from the rood screen, the pulpit. These walls have come out with lots of lovely detail that we haven't seen before, and that's another advantage of stacking the images, is that you get layer of detail on top of layer of detail. So we're getting that all coming out, and similarly in the roof, all that lovely carving. The only thing that's looking slightly unnatural to me is actually the stained glass itself. And I think that's probably because the multiple layers are making it almost too saturated. So I might just take the saturation down ever so slightly. Let's just try sort of down -9. I'll just wipe a mask all over that. And that's completely aesthetic. You know, you could keep it as saturated as you like. I'm just going to take it down a little touch. Possibly even more. Yeah, I'm a bit happy with that. Just to make it a little bit more natural looking. So really cracking photograph taken by one of our students, Peter. And hopefully that gives you a good sense of how easy it can be to stack those images together to make an HDR, high dynamic range image. And it's just a really useful tool to have in your photographic arsenal when you get to a situation where you're like, I just can't make this image work. There's bits that are too dark, too bright, or you can always make an image like this. We did this manually by changing the f-stops, but most cameras now will have some kind of bracketed exposure feature. So have a little look at your manual, or have a look on YouTube and work out for your particular camera how you go into that. And then all you would do then is have to expose for the sort of the middle, or the sort of neutral exposure, so to speak, and your camera will then automatically take shots a few stops down or a few stops up, depending on what you've set it to, and you can change that as well. So you press your shutter release, and bang, 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 3 shots will go out, or 5 shots will go out, depending on what you set it to. And then you can process it when you get home. So I hope that's been useful. As always, please do drop in the comments any questions you may have, share any images or top tips that you may have. It would be great to get some chat going on and see what you're up to. Thanks very much, and see you soon.